Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here. On behalf of the Board of Trustees and the staff and the volunteers of the Computer History Museum, I want to welcome you to the 27th year of our Fellows Awards. This all began in 1986 with the induction of Grace Murray Hopper, and the 64 fellows to date, soon to be 67, represent heroes of the computer revolution. I want to thank longtime trustee Ike Nassy for chairing the Fellows Nomination Committee yet again this year with the help of Cynthia Holliday of Upright Marketing. Every year Ike tries to resign and I tell him that's not allowed. With the help of Cynthia Holliday of Upright Marketing for running the process, and of course we thank our very fair and very anonymous panel of judges who helps us decide each year. The panel changes each year. We often have previously inducted fellows as part of it, so it's a fun group. Our nominations are open to the public, and the nominations for the 2015 awards will be up on our website soon, so help us decide who should be up next. The electronic stored program computer is 65 years old. The genesis story, the creation myth of the computer, goes something like this. In the beginning, John von Neumann created hardware and software. Now the computer was without form and void, and John said, "Let there be applications." And John saw the applications and that they were good. Now, like most creation myths, this is inaccurate, incomplete, and certainly not true anymore. The world of computing is no longer divided into hardware and software. Sure, computers are still made out of atoms. We don't know how to get around that. But it's software, the patterns of bits that aren't made out of anything, that controls how they're designed, how they're built, and how they're used. In the Digital Logic Gallery downstairs, where we try to explain how computers work, there's this giant ruby litho film that's maybe 6 feet wide and 6 feet tall that has the design of a computer chip that was done by hand and checked by hand, each transistor. That is so quaint. I mean, nobody does that anymore. Designers today write software code in high-level programming languages to create new hardware architectures and new communications networks, which means basically that this year's computers are the ones that do the detailed design of next year's computers. The fellows that we're inducting today know a lot about that particular process, which you'll hear more about later. When it began 35 years ago, the predecessor of this institution, the Computer Museum in Boston, had a mission to collect hardware. Software? That was strange stuff that somebody else might preserve the history of, although it wasn't clear who. When I started this incarnation of the museum 18 years ago, we embraced software as part of the mission. We now have major initiatives to collect, to interpret, to understand, and to explain the significance of software as an intellectual accomplishment that has become critical to our civilization. We do both atoms and bits. But what is it about software that we should preserve? The traditional historians of computing focus only on externals, the social, the political, the business, the economic forces that encourage and drive and are affected by these innovations. That's important stuff, and we do it too. In fact, we do it much more than we used to. We're currently fundraising for what will be a magnificent exhibit focused entirely on software. The physical version of it will be downstairs, right below this auditorium, and of course it'll be on the web as well. It's called Make Software Change the World. And it contains a lot about software that has changed our lives and how it came to be created. But there's another important part of the story, the history of the technology itself. Most traditional historians don't cover that. One of them, Martin Campbell Kelly, who's himself a computer scientist at the University of Warwick in England, once said, "I'd sooner tackle a Babylonian clay tablet than try to decode a core dump or software source code from the 1960s. I've actually gotten to know Martin, and I like him. He's really quite a fine chap and a very brilliant historian, but he's just wrong about this point. Software source code, including the code that represents hardware and network designs, is the literature of computer scientists and engineers. Human beings write it to be read by computers, but also to be read by other human beings. Now, reading it isn't that easy. It's less like reading Harry Potter and more like reading Finnegan's Wake. Think of it as poetry that's written in ancient Greek. You have to learn the language to understand it in the original form. But once you do, it gives you a view into the mind of the creator. You see what his intentions were, what things were hard, what things were easy, what new algorithms were invented, or more often than not, reinvented, what mistakes were made, what parts were beautiful and what parts were ugly. It's like reading Leonardo da Vinci's Codex. We see what he knew and what he didn't know, and what he succeeded at and what he failed at. Unfortunately, we rarely get those opportunities. We often only see the end result. Wouldn't it be great to have the original plans and the schedules for the building of the pyramids or the medieval cathedral at Chartres, and not just know the finished product? Most of you have seen the Babbage engine downstairs. We were very lucky that the plans, the source code, if you will, of that particular invention had been preserved so that it could be built for the first time 150 years after it was designed. One of my personal projects at the museum has been to find, to preserve, and to release historic source code and the associated documentation. What the programmers actually wrote, including all of the comments, which are sometimes funny and snarky and sometimes even anguished. We've done that with the permission of the copyright owners, of course, which is often difficult to accomplish, for Adobe's Photoshop, for IBM's APL and Fortran programming languages, for Apple's Mac Paint, for Apple II DOS, for Microsoft's MS-DOS and Microsoft Word for Windows, and many others are in the works, including more from the first generation of computers in the 1950s, whose source code is still available in some forms. As it turns out, there are plenty of people who can decode those particular clay tablets and who enjoy doing it. At last count, there were 500,000 people who read the blog articles surrounding the last two releases of our software source code, and about 100,000 geeky nerds who actually downloaded the code. Our web servers were creaking under the load. This really isn't a surprise to me. After all, coding is all the rage these days. There's code.org, there's the Hour of Code, there's Code Day, there's Black Girls Code. These are all organizations. The Code Camp, Girls Teach Girls to Code, Raspberry Pi Day, and more of this, all aimed at getting young people excited about writing software. By the way, if you think that Raspberry Pi is a dessert, then you're just not keeping up. This renewed enthusiasm for programming is fantastic. 2 weeks ago, there were headline stories in all the newspapers about a software bug. I'm sure you heard about it. It was called Heartbleed. It made 2/3 of the servers on the internet vulnerable to malicious attacks. And it caused anxiety attacks for millions of people who were concerned that their credit card numbers and other important information had been stolen. This might not have happened if more people were reading code. This was open source, so of course I ran to the web to look at the code that had the bug in it, and it wasn't at all subtle or complicated. It was an obvious and almost naive error that any clever middle school student could have found. If you want to know what the bug was, by the way, come see me later. I can explain it to you in 15 seconds. I think the moral is that we need more middle school kids who know how to write code and who can tell good code from bad code. That's a much better way for them to spend their time than delivering newspapers. At the Computer History Museum, our role is to help people understand all aspects of the development of computers: the hardware, the software, the technology, the impact, the makers, and the users. And we delight in celebrating the accomplishments of the brilliant people who invent the technology. That's why we're here tonight, to make heroes of the people who design the architecture of computers, who create new uses, and yes, who write code that we are happy to show to the world and preserve forever. The Computer Museum has made enormous progress in the last 6 years, and we have many exciting projects in the works. All of this is due in large part to the brilliant leadership of its CEO, and it's a great pleasure for me to be able to work with him. Please give a warm welcome to John Holler.
Lynn, thank you so much, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let me add my welcome to the words that Lynn said to all of you tonight. That was a wonderful explanation of why we do what we do and why we're making this major expansion into the history of software, and Lynn's leadership in that has just meant everything. Let me just say that you look great. You look absolutely fantastic. Down in the lobby, one of the coolest parties of the year, it had to be, and you look fantastic now, and in fact, I'm going to take your picture. So smile, everyone. I'm going to do a little panorama here. So just let me just kind of get this. All right. Wow. You look. Don't move. You'll be blurry. Well, I was going to say that. You know, Ellen already did the selfie thing, so I really can't copy that. But I am going to tweet this. So it's hashtag CHMFellows14. If you want a copy of the photo, just track that hashtag, and maybe we'll break Ellen's record. I don't know. I don't think so, really. But by the way, the fact that I can do all that has everything to do with the fellows that we're honoring tonight. Dr. Irwin Jacobs had the vision and determination to pioneer a whole new generation of digital networks and much of the computing power that runs them. Lynn Conway ushered in a new generation of semiconductor design. And John Crawford helped to put the power of the x86 processor architecture in 1 billion homes and offices, or maybe more. That's it. Give it up for the fellows. I like that. Go ahead. That's the impact that our fellows have had on the world. There have only been 68 of them in 27 years, and all of them have changed the world forever and for better. And we consider it an honor and really even a joy to celebrate their accomplishments, to tell their stories and step by step to transform the world's understanding of our relationship with computing, its history, and its implications for the future. The Fellows Dinner represents the hard work and support of a lot of people, and I'd like to take just a second to thank them now. First of all, thank you to our sponsors. We have a number of enormously generous sponsors who helped us tonight to make the dinner possible, led by our headline sponsor, Qualcomm, our major sponsors, Intel and Accenture, and also a large number of patron sponsors who are now appearing on the screen. I want to thank also our incredibly talented and dedicated Board of Trustees. Many of them are listed here, and many others are attending tonight. Year after year, I think they prove that we have one of the best nonprofit boards in the country. It starts with our founder and chairman, Lynn Shustic, and the other 41 members of the board. They're absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And in particular, I want to thank Peggy Burke, whose wonderful team at 1185 Design contributed the graphic design for this year's awards, those wonderful banners that hang on the elevator downstairs. Thanks to you tonight. We're really happy that you're here. And I also want to give special thanks to Valerie Alston and Karina Sweet, who produced these wonderful evenings. See, those are the people who sent the 1,000 emails to Karina in the last 7 days, just to make sure they had a space at the table and everything was good. And I'm glad you're giving her a little love. John Plude, who produces the staging and the films that you're going to see later, and also to Allegra, the company that provides the production support and makes this room look so spectacular. It's been, thank you. It's been quite a year since we saw you in 2013 at the Fellow Awards. You may remember, if you were here, that was the night we inducted Pixar co-founder Ed Catmull and internet pioneer Bob Taylor, and Harry Huskey, who programmed the ENIAC and is one of the last living people to have worked with Alan Turing. It's been a busy year in other ways. Our acclaimed Revolutionary Speaker Series has had a fantastic run of guests. We began with a focus on sports. The Oracle USA America's Cup team talked about the technology behind their boat that just might give them enough of an edge to beat the Kiwis. Bob Bowman of Major League Baseball showed us how computing is completely transforming its relationship with fans. Sheryl Sandberg talked about her best-selling book, Lean In. Eric Schmidt showed up to be the moderator. A few weeks later, Sheryl turned the tables. She became the moderator for Eric and his co-author Jared Cohen in their fascinating book, The New Digital Age. Three of the best technology journalists in the country looked at the revolution that they've been covering. Wired Magazine's Stephen Levy, Pulitzer Prize winner John Markoff, David Kirkpatrick of The Facebook Effect. We looked at the history and the work and the future of great research labs with IBM Senior Vice President John Kelly, SRI President Kurt Carlson, Vice President Bill Mark, Intel Fellow Justin Ratner. We welcomed John von Neumann's daughter, Marina von Neumann, who has written a wonderful book called The Martian's Daughter. And the Smithsonian's Richard Curran showed up to discuss his brilliant book, The History of America in 101 Objects, two of which are in our collection. We looked into the future with top technology executives like Qualcomm Chairman Paul Jacobs and Padmasree Warrior of Cisco. Regis McKenna told incredible stories about more than 4 decades of marketing and strategy in Silicon Valley. Peretz Levi, the president of the Technion in Israel, talked about what it's like to build a global MIT. Our Game Changer series looked at the history and future of high-tech gaming with EA founder Trip Hawkins and Sony PlayStation founder Shu Yoshida and co-developer Mark Cerny. We went behind the scenes of 30 years of technology with Cirque du Soleil. FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler made a major policy address in this room, as did California Governor Jerry Brown and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. On the morning they signed a major new trade agreement between California and Israel on this stage. We hosted a special evening to look back on the remarkable career of Doug Engelbart. Here's Stuart Brand, who filmed that special day as a young man in 1968 and talked about what it was like to see the mother of all demos. Our education team welcomed thousands of students, including a special day called Talking to the Future, where they work side by side with Valley rock stars like Reena Singhal Lee, who runs voice recognition for Android, and Ryan Gurmick, the lead doodler of the Google Doodle team, and Google data scientist Sarab Madan, and the chief creative officer of Electronic Arts, Rich Hilleman. In December, as Lynn mentioned, we staged an hour of code. 40% of all visitors to the museum stopped in the lobby and did an hour of code. As they do every year, the future history makers of our NextGen board welcomed young entrepreneurs, engineers, and interns from all over the Valley. They met some of the top founders of Silicon Valley's hottest startups. They networked like crazy. They toured our exhibits and they learned that they're part of something bigger and historic. And who knows, I think a few maybe even found someone special. And our interpretive content machine just kept on running. We partnered with the Boston Computer Society to restore and make their historic and large video archive available to the public. That project launched in January on the 30th anniversary of the Macintosh, when we released this rare, fully restored footage of Steve Jobs' first public presentation of the Mac in 1984. We continued, as Lynn said, our groundbreaking work in the release of vintage code, MS-DOS, Word for Windows. Our exhibits team opened the 1401 Demo Lab. If you want to punch a card and see an old computer run, you should come by. And some great former IBMers will help you do it. We took a major step toward opening that new Software History Center, and the opening of the new exhibit, Make Software Change the World, which will be on the other side of the museum in 6,000 brand new square feet, not currently open to the public. And finally, we harnessed the very technology we tell the history of to begin giving guided tours remotely through Beam robots. Our first community of outreach is to a group of quadriplegics who live throughout the United States. It opens their world. One emailed us after his tour and said, "I felt like I was walking." Irwin, Lynn, and John, you've been part of this community in many ways for many years. Tonight, we welcome you as the fellows in the class of 2014. We'll hear much more about you later this evening. It's a great privilege to have you here and to welcome you into the hall. And so now, it's my pleasure to simply say, enjoy your dinner, enjoy each other. The program will continue shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening. It's an honor to be here tonight at the Computer History Museum. And Qualcomm is proud to serve as the headline sponsor for the 2014 Fellow Awards. We have the good fortune actually of being a leading company, and actually in an industry which we think is actually still very, very young, and that's the mobile industry. And I think it's an industry also that's had a lot of positive change, but it's an industry at its heart, it really is a computing industry, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. And it's, I think, really significant what's happened over the last several years, and we're happy to be actually included in a group like this. We wouldn't even have thought about that when the company was founded. But it's very, very, very interesting. You know, in the technology industry, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about what's coming next and thinking about the future and trying to future the other person in many times. But I think it's also important to think about how we got here and to pay attention not only to the giants of the industry, but also some of the stories of how the industry changed and how it got here. And so I'm going to tell a quick one actually about Irwin Jacobs, and I'll be very quick. If you look at the scale of mobile, we shipped last year, we shipped somewhere in the neighborhood of about 750 million units. A lot of them are computers, actually. I mean, almost all of them are tiny little computers that you put in a cell phone. And the basic architecture that we used for that is maybe about 500 million units of those 750 million units. And one of the honorees tonight actually kept us from canceling making that decision. It was about 2005. We all wanted to not do that, actually. And we came and we talked to Irwin, and we said we can't afford to do this new type of chip, and we should probably focus on the old version. And he was smart enough to tell us to go back and do something different. And today, if you look, I mean, if you look at those numbers, that's probably more than the PC market, actually. And we would have really missed out on that had he not had the foresight to keep people really engaged in the right way. And I think there are probably 100 stories like that in the computer industry of someone making the right decision at the right time, and it really led to another wave of growth. And I'm sure there are a lot of people doing that today in the Valley and other places, and we're excited to be a part of that. So if we look at the Museum of Fellows, I think it's appropriate to pay attention and to support them. And at Qualcomm, we're very, very excited to be able to be a part of that and to sponsor that and to really help preserve the history of the computing industry. So on behalf of Qualcomm and representing its 31,000 employees worldwide, I'm happy to welcome you tonight and to join this celebration of greatness with the induction of the Computer History Museum's Fellows Class of 2014. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Are you having a good time? Yeah. Outstanding. You still look great. I'm just looking at my phone. So here it is. It's hashtag CHM Fellows 14, if you haven't picked it up. I mean, it really is amazing. Although I have to say, when I look at you in panorama, I'm reminded a little of that final scene from The Shining. If you saw that. If you look at the photo, you'll understand. And so if you see Jack Nicholson around anywhere, just take care. It's actually appropriate that you do look that way because have you noticed the theme for tonight? Anybody recognize the music and the graphics? Tron. I heard someone say it. Tron. Tron. Yes. Tron. It is Tron, and it's a bit of a merger of Silicon Valley and Hollywood. Now, the merger of Silicon Valley and Hollywood is not a new thing this year because Silicon Valley has become such a glamorous place. And the world thinks of the glamour of Silicon Valley is, you know, it's a place where ideas just grow on trees and then Mark Zuckerberg comes along and buys a tree for $19 billion. But the other reason that it's glamorous is that Hollywood really is all over Silicon Valley. You name the storyline, and there's somebody from Hollywood scouting around trying to put it together. Now take this one. This is a very basic one, the rags to riches story. You remember when Hollywood used to think of this as a rags to riches story? Well, now it's this. Anybody watching this? Who's watching Silicon Valley on HBO? All right. Well, so that's how, this is the hot new situation comedy on HBO. It's called Silicon Valley. And the Wall Street Journal in its April 4th edition described it that way. It said, this is America's modern rags to riches story. But you know, here's the thing. How do you know when they've gone from rags to riches? I mean, the people I know around the valley look like this every day. In fact, that guy on the far right, that's the vice chairman of our board. Looking at you, Dave. You know, of course, computers have a long history of involvement with big stardom in Hollywood. You may remember this one, Colossus, the Forbin project. So in case you haven't seen it, Colossus is all about a very powerful computer that ends up enslaving the entire human race. I know, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, that was 1970s science fiction. And we all know today that computers just do not have the power to control humans. I'm a little embarrassed to tell you this part, but things are so hot for Silicon Valley right now that I have my own movie deal. That's right. And I'm really excited because, you know, my agent told me that there is a major star who is really excited about playing me. But I don't want to suffer in case, I don't want the museum to suffer in case my movie flops. So maybe we'll just stick to making news. I mean, Lynn talked about our software source code project, and I'm proud to make some news tonight actually with that source code project. You're the first ones to know that we've actually been given the source code for Facebook. That's right. And here it is. You know, actually, it doesn't take the magic of Hollywood to make computer history compelling. All we have to do is stick to the facts, because the facts are compelling enough. Last year, people from more than 100 countries visited the museum. We've now become a kind of must-see destination here in the Bay Area. Computerhistory.org attracts about 7 million page views now a year from an audience all over the world, and our YouTube channel is about to top 5 million views. So we don't even have any cat videos. Maybe we should. So I say good luck, Hollywood, because I believe we already have the best stories. Computer history is epic. We have the best props. We have 100,000 items in our collection and counting. And most of all, we have the best cast. The extraordinary men and women who've done amazing things and have changed civilization. We honor 3 more of them, Lynn, John, and Irwin, tonight. And tonight, we also feature some new members of the cast. They're making their debuts. Tonight, the inductions of our class of 2014 will be made by 3 founding members of our Next Gen Advisory Board, the future history makers who help us connect the past to the future for young entrepreneurs and founders and engineers throughout the Valley. It's the generation whose leaders will be the fellows of 2044. They represent the full spectrum. Julia Grace runs engineering for a new startup in Palo Alto. Alec Detweiler is a senior project manager at a major company you will all recognize. And Sunil Nagaraj is an entrepreneur and venture investor. So to begin tonight's induction ceremony, please help me welcome to the stage Julia Grace.
I didn't bring my phone. I'm really regretting it. I should have taken a photo. Like, it would have been awesome, maybe next year. Anyway, good evening. I'm Julia Grace. I run engineering at Tindy. I'm on the NextGen board, and it is very much my honor to introduce Lynn Conway this evening. Conway began her career at IBM, where she made important contributions to the Advanced Computer Systems Computer Project. While working at Xerox PARC in Palo Alto in the mid to late 1970s, Conway developed, with Carver Mead at Caltech, a radical new approach to the design of very large-scale integration integrated circuits. The Mead-Conway method revolutionized the design of digital systems of all kinds and trained an entire generation of students and faculty in the design and manufacture of complex integrated circuits, skills they would soon use to transform global electronics and computer industries. Tonight, we honor Lynn Conway and present a short summary of her contributions to computing.
I sort of feel like, I was always like a weed growing in a very, very tailored garden. The thing that really was a central experience was when I was 10 years old. I went to summer camp in Maine. I didn't know how to swim. I learned how to swim. I learned how to swim really well. And learned how to go fishing. We'd go out in rowboats and fish and catch things. That, I think, was really central in triggering me to always wanting to follow opportunities to go off on weird adventures in the woods or in the mountains or in the rivers or the seashore, to go places and just do stuff. Life to me has been a kind of a long series of trying to figure things out, how to make something, how to do something, how to learn something, and so that always became a habit, I think, at a very early age. And I think that's the way a lot of engineering is done. You can't figure out how to cross that river, but you want to cross that river, and you're trying to figure out stepping stones, a bridge. How do you make this? How do you make that? Somewhere along the line, all of a sudden, things fall in place, and you see the pieces you can put together to cross the river. It wasn't until I was a bit into my studies at MIT that I realized I'd actually missed my calling there, because I really ended up there getting infected with the emerging surge of paradigm-shifting knowledge that had come out of the rad lab at MIT. It was being injected in the electrical engineering courses there, to where you didn't just learn traditional circuit theory, but you also got infected with the basics of pulse and digital circuitry, right as it was sort of being rushed out of the lab and being codified into engineering courses. I think that something magical happened in the spring of 1977, when there was kind of an epiphany of realization about how to build the stepping stones to cross that river, how to see the pieces that you needed to put together. So it was a really exciting time, and it happened pretty quickly. All of a sudden, there was a way to connect simplification of abstraction levels with scaling of fabrication technology. In the spring of 1978, a really amazing opportunity presented itself. Bert Sutherland had been on the visiting committee, EECS department at MIT. He ended up working out an arrangement where I could go back to MIT and be a visiting faculty member and try a dry run of the book, sort of the whole course in prototype form, to see how this would work and to explore it and to try it out. If you walked around EECS departments, you can almost spot it from the end of a corridor or from a lobby looking up. You would see where it was happening, and that would be where the VLSI gang had got some territory, and they put their totems on the walls, which would be these big check plots, because the thing people did was amaze their peers, whether they're students or faculty, with these giant check plots they could produce that showed every transistor and every wire in their designs. And so these were all over walls everywhere. So this now, you see, took on the atmosphere of being a movement. and And it's really interesting how this all kind of cohered. A lot of what I've done is just playful adventuring, but having been stimulated with sort of an unusual collection of sort of basis points, of points of view about what people can do and so forth. And in a way, it's never about the things. It's about the ideas that get in motion in groups of people, ideas on how to make things.
The 2014 Fellow Award is presented to Lynn Conway for tonight for her work in developing and disseminating new methods of integrated circuit design. We are honored to have her tonight, and congratulations.
Thank you. Many thanks, folks. What a thrill it is to be here with you tonight. This is such a special place. A place where we can see in the archives and the exhibits the many tracks left behind by those who've gone before. And where we can ponder and wonder where it's all headed next. You see, that's really the greatness of our wonderful field of computing. Provides us with the intellectual power tools and the social interaction tools to ever further explore that greatest of frontiers, the frontier of what is possible to do. And I feel especially honored to enter the Hall of Fellows because it's a place where so many of my personal heroes already reside. And it's also wonderful to be here and just meet and share war stories with friends and colleagues from the past. And even more than the tracks we all leave behind, it's our memories of the teams we joined and the adventures we went on together that count in the end. Flying out here, I recall another flight almost 50 years ago, back in 1965. I was in my 20s and on the team architecting a secret new IBM supercomputer. In my suitcase were the lab notes for the machine's architectural simulator. But high above the clouds flying along, I was reading a spellbinding new book, Steve Roper's Climber's Guide to Yosemite Valley. And I think that captures something. It's, along with thousands of other young engineers streaming into what would become Silicon Valley, I was being inexorably pulled along by a sense of serious adventures ahead. But when I found myself at Xerox PARC in 1973, I had no idea how wild it could become. It was such a magical place, and there are many people here who are part of it. Folks were finding gold everywhere, rushing about sharing it with everyone else, collectively launching the modern network personal computer revolution. And meanwhile, under the leadership of Bert Sutherland and Ivan Sutherland, some of us teamed up, figured things out, and showed folks how to exploratorily craft complex digital machines and how to get them printed in silicon. What a time it was. Many here shared along the way in those adventures, and it's really wonderful to see you again. And I'd especially like to recognize some special people at my table. First, Bert Sutherland is here with his wife, Sylvia. Real hand for Bert. Bert's really one of the Bert's one of the great research managers, and he took a big chance on me and was my mentor and my coach all along the way. And I couldn't have done all that stuff without his guidance. I also want to really recognize Dick Lyon and his wife Peggy. Dick is one of the great engineering explorers in this valley. And back on our ascents of the big walls of microelectronics, the team would often get to a point we'd all look up and we'd look at each other and wonder, oh geez, can anyone lead this one? And Dick would just take the lead, make the crux moves, and bring us on up. And we'd never have made the tops without him. And I also especially want to recognize my husband and my soulmate, Charles Rogers. Yet another engineer. And we've been together 26 years now and enjoyed one adventure after another. But stepping back and sort of looking ahead, I'd like us to reflect on all the adventurous young people now streaming into Silicon Valleys all around the world, hoping to join in and team up and engineer ever better futures. I was wondering, what words can we leave to guide them and their children and their children's children so they can go adventuring, so they can go surfing together high atop the ever more wondrous incoming waves of innovation. What words? And I'm reminded of the legendary French writer and aviator Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who said, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alec Detweiler from Apple and co-chair of the Next Gen board. It is my honor to introduce to you John Crawford. Tonight, we honor John Crawford, chief architect of the Intel x86 processor family. In 1982, Crawford was responsible for extending 286 processor instruction set into a 32-bit device to be known as the 8386. Over the course of the next several years, he led the architecture teams designing the follow-on 8486 and Pentium processor families. Processors based on the x86 architecture have powered the personal computer revolution since the 1980s, and today are found in tens of thousands of devices worldwide, including powerful servers, mobile devices, and supercomputers. Tonight, we honor John Crawford and present a short summary of his contributions to computing.
So my interaction with Fred Brooks was one of the reasons I went there. One of the best things I did, best experiences I had at North Carolina was taking a computer architecture class from him. And one of the things about that, he walked us through some of the basics, but then each of us had to pick a computer and do a term paper, if you will. And I said, this Intel 8080, this is an interesting thing. So I did my project on the Intel 8080 and did my term report and so on. And Brooks was not impressed with my paper. He wrote some comments on it. I think I got a B on the on the report and to be in the class. But off the bat, you could tell my interest was in, I already had sparked an interest in this microprocessor, the microprocessor side. Intel was by far the smallest company that I had interviewed with, and my experience with the 8080 and understanding that and wanting to explore, jump in and be a part of that, I thought to be very intriguing, very exciting. So I decided to come on out to Intel. I think the idea was they wanted to get something, a simple extension of the 286, get it out to market, get it underway. Some of the key goals for the 386 team were, first and foremost, make it a real 32-bit computer. The second aspect was to come up with a memory management scheme that provided a full, flat 32-bit address space. And the third, but maybe the first, was be compatible and be able to run 286 and 8086 software, binary software. I had a lot of software experience. I knew the 8086 instruction set backwards, forwards, upside down, every little bit, which was great, a very important piece of the puzzle. At that time, Intel took a risk. They took a risk on me stepping in to lead the architecture of this new product. The way the 386 architecture development proceeded was I was the lead architect from the architecture side. At one point in time, we had two competing directions for the 386 architecture. Not only did we compete internally, but we had this fabulous idea of taking a roadshow out to visit some of the key customers and get some feedback from them in terms of, well, there's door number 1, door number 2, what do you like? I viewed it as a marathon. We started the 386, and before you're done with the 386, you got to get going on the 46. Before you're done with the 46, you got to get going on the 586, which became the Pentium processor. So I think running really a 10-year marathon was another accomplishment, and being able to provide continuity. I never really was tempted to leave Intel. I was very much, for that period of time, it was exactly where I wanted to be. They were at the center of the microprocessor marketplace. Their products were the leading products in the industry. I had the opportunity to be a part of that and to set direction and develop products that millions of people would use. So looking back, I think my biggest contribution was actually the 386 activity, that defining a good 32-bit extension of that instruction set and establishing really the x86 kind of architecture that then was the key product in the industry for so many years.
The 2014 Fellows Award is presented to John Crawford tonight for his seminal work on industry standard microprocessor architectures. Please welcome John to the stage.
Good evening. So, first of all, thank you to the Computer History Museum for this recognition. It's a great honor to join the extraordinary people that have been named Museum Fellows. And all the more because the museum is such a classy institution. The event tonight is a testament to that, but even more so are the world-class exhibits, the industry-leading talks and events, and so much more. They do things right here. Yeah, you can clap. Next, I'd like to thank Intel for taking a big risk in 1982 with a young software engineer with zero experience or training in electronics and making me the architect of the 386. Of course, it wasn't the important chip at the time, but only another series in a series of gap filler products. But Intel was quite successful with these gap fillers, and as was the broader industry. I guess we filled quite a gap. I'd also like to thank my fellow museum fellow, Lynn Conway. She provided the only training I had in electronics and integrated circuit technology. As I recognized that I had no training in key parts of this new adventure, I took a course on VLSI technology on the Stanford TV network. Online classes were delivered over TV back then. And of course, studied from the famous Mead and Conway text. So thank you, Lynn. The year 1982, when this adventure started, kicked off an extraordinary period in my life. A new job was only the beginning. That year I met my future wife, Norma. 2 years later we were married, and 30 years later, we're still married. We're still married in spite of the work-life imbalance from Intel. In 1985, the year after we got married, I did a 2-month sabbatical trip through Europe. This was carefully timed to get the architect out of the country while the final chip design work was taking place. It was fine with us. I started work on the 46 processor that year, and the 386 processor was introduced. You know, again, you get started on the next one before you can push the previous one out the door. The next year, in 1986, my son Alex was born, and the 386 shipped. Alex shipped, 386 shipped. Alex could not be with us tonight. He's out on active deployment with the Navy. In 1987, I became a Christian and was baptized. Then in 1989, work started on the Pentium processor. The 46 shipped, and my daughter Rebecca was born. She's here tonight celebrating with me. Of course, all those chips and the others that followed are long obsolete, but my wife Norma, my children Alex and Becky, and my Christian faith remain. In closing, I thank God for these and many more blessings He showered on me during my life. It's been an extraordinary adventure. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sunil Nagaraj with Bessemer Venture Partners and co-chair of the Next Gen Board. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Irwin Jacobs. From 1959 to 1972, Jacobs was a professor of electrical engineering at MIT and UCSD, during which time he wrote his seminal textbook, Principles of Communications Engineering, a book still in use today. In 1985, Jacobs and others founded Qualcomm to build mobile two-way satellite communication systems. Jacobs soon advocated for a new digital telephony standard developed at Qualcomm known as CDMA. CDMA would maximize transmission rates, allowing for high-speed wireless data transmission, in turn making possible the mobile data-driven world of today. Tonight we honor Irwin Jacobs and present a short summary of his contributions to computing.
Well, it was a very exciting time at MIT, and in fact Claude Shannon was coming to be a faculty member, and there were the beginnings of the early courses in information theory. Found that fascinating, completed my thesis in reliable networks, which kind of tied back a bit into some of the work that Shannon had previously done. At the time, a lot of the interest was in sending bits over the telephone lines. We started Linkabit as essentially a day-a-week consulting for each of us. It began to grow. We began to get some small projects, usually government projects. The Army needed in one of their satellite terminals to have some decoding equipment. We proposed and competed with a number of other companies to provide a Viterbi decoder. And so that was our first step into manufacturing, was manufacturing Viterbi decoders. The ARPANET was then just beginning to operate around connecting largely universities in the US. few other research establishments. Bob came and said one day, let's run an experiment where we connect all of this together with this new internet protocol we've developed. And so we did that, I think it was 1977. It worked, but nobody really thought too much about it at that time. In 1980, we sold Linkabit to MACOM. And so on July 1st of 85, we got everybody together and decided to start the company. And then the question of a name came up. We talked about quality communications. Let's go ahead with Qualcomm. The industry had looked and seen now that the cellular business was really growing. It was a serious business. But staying with analog, with first generation FM radios, was not the right solution. How do we go digital? Companies around the world had looked at CDMA, played with it a while, and they had all thrown it away. But then people began to think that maybe voice isn't enough. We need to have data over wireless and have internet access. Suddenly realized that perhaps CDMA was the best approach. We became very focused on, first of all, on the communication capability, on how do we get high data rates through through wireless. And secondly, if you could do that, what about the devices? What might we do with the devices? So we started focusing on that while other people are still trying to worry about the communication side only, and that's given us a lead that we've tried to keep ever since. We're really still just scratching the surface of what I think we're going to be able to do with wireless and smart devices. As I walk down the street or sit in a luncheon or have a meeting and see the number of times people are glancing down at their devices and texting or getting information, answering a question by Googling it, whatever, doing that wirelessly just gives a great satisfaction to see that happening.
The 2014 Fellow Award is presented to Irwin Jacobs tonight for his pioneering work in digital mobile telephony, data, and communications technology. So please join me in welcoming Irwin Jacobs to the stage to accept the award.
It's a great pleasure to be here again at the Computer History Museum. What was that? Is something funny? Okay. In any case, it reminds me of my first visit, or my most recent visit here before this special honor, and that was in celebration of the 30th anniversary of that internet experiment that was shown on the video, where we connected up 3 different networks, one of which was our SatNet over to Europe, and showed that the protocol would indeed work with 3 different types of networks and make them work reasonably well. We didn't think of that being very special at the time, but of course it has been very much become that. The next visit also I took advantage of. When I was a senior at Cornell, I did a project, and that project was building a digital differential analyzer out of parts from an IBM 650 computer. And for those that might remember, that was a magnetic drum machine with logic elements that were very large, 2 gates to a fairly large stack. And so when I came here, the first thing I wanted to see was a digital differential analyzer, and there is one here. It was made by Bendix, I think. And of course, an IBM 650 computer. So it brought back lots of very special memories. I had the opportunity today to go down and take a quick tour of everything, I'll go up, no down, of everything that's been going on in the museum, and found actually one of the very first products that Qualcomm had made. When we started, we didn't have any products in mind, but we did go ahead and develop a terminal for use by the trucking industry, a satellite terminal that could work across the entire continent. Downstairs, when you go and take a look, you'll see there's a bicycle, and on the back of the bicycle is one of our terminals providing internet connectivity for that bicycle. So if you want to go biking across country, that might be one of the solutions. Of course, now with cell phones, we don't quite need that solution. The other aspect, we began to look at CDMA back when we first started the company, had to delay it until we had this project OmniTrax that provided some cash flow, and then returned to look at the use of CDMA. And it was a huge battle. There were these religious wars that went on for a number of years between TDMA and CDMA, and they continued through what's called the second generation of cellular, the use of digital, mostly for voice. But then about 2000, we began to look very hard at using the CDMA technology for digital data for very efficient, high-rate mobile access, and came up with a number of very good ideas that led to this whole third generation of cellular that now supports perhaps 3 billion users around the world accessing the internet that way. Well, as Steve mentioned earlier, we also realized that just having the communication capability wasn't enough, that one also needed to have a device that had a lot of computing power, and it had to run on a battery. And so we made a decision, and it was a little bit of a controversial decision, to go and set up a group, actually back in Research Triangle Park, to focus on how do we build processors that sip the energy from the batteries. And of course, we've been working at that ever since, and the results just become more and more exciting. The device we carry in our pockets has a huge amount of computing power, as well, of course, as the ability to take panoramic pictures, as well as to get position location, just all types of interesting possibilities. And so we focused on that and have very much been involved with continuing what I think will be yet another several generation of Moore's Law, continuing to further improve the capabilities of those chips. But the exciting thing is that not only do you have all this capability in your pocket and very high data rate internet access, but now more and more types of sensors that you can attach to the phones and kind of sense the world around you, the environment, all types of other possibilities, plus, of course, a number of internal functions. And so I think the impact that these cell phones have had on our lives has been immense to date, but really just beginning. I think we're going to see all kinds of breakthroughs in health, education, and many other areas. So looking back, I would say that probably the one regret I have at this point, a fairly minor one, but it was mentioned that we named the company for quality communications. So on the end of Qualcomm, we have 2 M's. But now I think most of our people, or a good percentage of them, are working on computing. So the regret is that perhaps we should have ended it with 1 M and covered both computing and communications. It's great joining this wonderful group of pioneers in computing, and I look forward to many more visits here to the Computer History Museum and watching what's going on. And by the way, I would hope that in the future there's a very large display of cell phones and the computing capability of cell phones. And the lucky aspect is it doesn't take much space. Thank you very much.
congratulations again to our three wonderful fellows, Lynn, John, and Irwin. Thank you so much for everything you've done to make history. All right, so now, ladies and gentlemen, the party continues, and in some way, it's just beginning, because when you go back down to the lobby, you're going to see a fabulous after party set up for you with dessert and coffee and drinks. There's even a cigar bar. I hope you'll venture outside and enjoy the fresh air and the big tent. And I will say, Revolution, the exhibit, is now open. So if you didn't see Revolution before you came to the party tonight, please do go through it, and I think you'll be thrilled and delighted. You've been fantastic. I'll see you downstairs at the after party. Thank you, everyone.